Haley, where would incentives for this data collection fall in place? Like, anytime the university sends out a survey they want us to do, it's always, do the survey and enter to win $100 at the bookstore or whatever.
That increases the response rate. And so that's quite valid. You have to be careful if you're doing it not to appear biased. If you're doing a survey like this, bias is a really big deal because people think, oh, well, they want me to answer a particular way. So we've used those things in the past where enter to win or the first 100 people to answer get a book or whatever. And so that's quite valid, but you just have to be careful what you're doing. We did this survey in Montana for the Forest Service. We did it as the university because we had fire money from a national grant. So we were working with the Forest Service, but not for the Forest Service. And the beetles that are eating their way across BC ate their way across the states as well. And so this woman decided to, she was really pissed off when she got this survey, and she thought that it was the Forest Service. So what she did, this was in California, and all documents were mailed back to Montana. She collected a box of beetles, dead beetles, and she mailed them with her response as part of a protest. And so it's got nothing to do with the incentive, but the perception of what you're doing. So her answers, not particularly valid because she wasn't even thinking clearly. She thought that the survey came from the Forest Service and it didn't. So we had to write back and say, okay, we understand your concern, but don't send dead beetles in the mail. So you get all kinds of crazy things. So you want to make sure that people understand what the survey is all about, where it's coming from. Okay, information component. The information that you present, and actually just saw a video when I was at a board meeting last week, and we talked about, I think I'll show the video in a while. The video had to do with communication and how somebody is talking about something and you have this idea of what it is and you don't realize that somebody else is interpreting it entirely differently. And relatively simple words, simple ideas, but so the facilitator of this board meeting talked about this and he showed this video, and sure enough, a couple hours later, this dispute sort of emerged because people didn't understand what each other was saying, and it took us hours to figure out that we actually meant the same thing. We were just talking about different things. So the information you put in the survey is really important. One, it has to, it has to describe the situation. If you're talking about improving a resource or an amenity or a service or providing something, then what specifically are you providing? How do you describe that? If you can use pictures, use pictures. Do you prefer this picture or this picture? And then it's clear, everybody has the same picture because it's not just in their head, it's on paper. And so they can interpret that picture. But the description of the situation is key. If people don't understand what it is you're asking them to value, because we're talking about Q here, right? What is it that you're describing? What are we trying to measure? This has to be crystal clear, and it has to be understood by everybody you think might be in your sample. So if you're talking to people who are sometimes close to illiterate or don't read and write very well, you have to consider it because their values matter. So how are you going to impart that information? We've moved, because the internet's so cheap and expensive, we can now do a lot of videos. So instead of sending a piece of paper, you can video somebody doing an interview or asking questions or explaining something and show them live footage. And this is useful for us in fire because we can show what a house looks like that's relatively safe versus one that is likely to burn down. So the meanings of what it is you're valuing, this Q, whether it's a quantity or a quality, and quality is important as well. How do you describe the improvement in quality? Are people willing to pay for better air pollution controls? Well, how do you define that? How do you show that? So the two have to go together. You can also provide scenarios. Describe what would happen if, and provide a range of scenarios so people understand that there are different levels of service. In terms of the info, you also have to talk about how you're going to provide the service. And make it realistic. So how are you going to increase quantity? How are you going to provide it if it doesn't exist? How are you going to improve the quality of the amenity that we're talking about? And those things have to be fairly real. People have to believe them. Because if you're asking contingent valuation, you're asking a question based on a hypothetical situation. If people don't believe you, they're going to give you hypothetical answers. So you want to make it as real as possible. Don't promise the world. So if you're reading these and you see somebody providing, oh, we're going to do this and this, and we're going to improve wetlands, think about, well, how are they going to do that? Does it make sense? Like I said in the beginning, I don't know how likely it is that you'll set up a survey and administer it and do it and get the results, as opposed to you will see the results of a survey and need to know the questions to ask to determine whether it's valid or not, or whether it's just crap. So you can think of it from that perspective. Okay. What are we up to? I'm sort of just winging it from this. Payment vehicle. This is E4. What do I mean by payment vehicle? Yeah. How am I going to get their money? How do I assess their value? Is it going to be taxes, fees, subsidies, a one-time fee, one-time payment?
You mean for people who you interview or for yours?
Yep. If I'm interviewing somebody and I say, well, I'm trying to find out the value of the dog park to all the people who go there. So you go there with your dog, you don't pay a fee, right? You just go in and let your dog run around. So if we're trying to assess the value of that, I might come up with a survey that focuses on the people who use the 3 or 4 parks in the city, only the people who walk dogs, because they would be the ones paying the fee, and I would set up a situation. If the city decides to go ahead with improvements in the park or to expand the park, so that's a quality quantity thing, we'll decide on one, would you be willing to pay? And so it would be, would you be willing to pay an annual fee with your dog license? Would you be willing to see an increase in your taxes? You know, why would I have to be careful about selecting a different payment vehicle? Now, people can say no to all of this, but do you see that maybe a one-time payment versus a tax would generate, I don't know, angst or consternation or whatever? Yeah, there's when I was going to school, the Montana Freemen? Remember those guys? There's a whole bunch of wackos in Idaho as well. And they're all super anti-government. And so they had some sort of stakeout and they were shooting people and whatever. If you were, and at the same time, just a little bit after, we were doing this survey to find out the value of the forest, the fire stuff. So if you ask somebody who is totally anti-government whether they're willing to pay higher taxes when they think their taxes are high already, what are they gonna do? In some cases, they'll shoot you, but you don't wanna go that close. Those guys you do the internet surveys with, for sure. But are you gonna get their real value? Maybe they do value fire protection. But when they see raised taxes, they're gonna go nuts, because they don't believe in big government, they don't believe in taxes. And so you're asking them a question that sparks an emotional response that pretty much nixes this. They're not gonna tell you their value because they're so focused on taxes. So you have to select a payment vehicle that makes sense to people so that you can get at their value of the quantity or the service or the quality that you're looking for. So you really have to understand the subject. Who are you surveying? This was a problem for us when we did a survey to find out the value of prescribed burning in Montana. So we asked Montana people, we looked at the Caucasian population and the Hispanic, and then we decided to do Native American. And our payment vehicle was a tax, a one-time property tax for whatever, for improvements to areas around their houses. When we extended the survey to the Native Americans, and when we did that, we realized that they don't pay taxes the same way that the rest of the population does because they're on their own land. So right away you have to make a modification. So that's, taxes are a big deal. So you got to think about what kind of payment vehicle.